Good afternoon, welcome to another A-Push video with Mr. Pate. Today we're looking at the domestic situation on the home front of the Civil War. You might say the whole war was fought in the United States, so of course it's all domestic. Well, we're talking about what's going on behind the scenes of the battles in the United States. Alright, we have 4 essential questions today. First, who were the dissenters in the North? Second, how did each side mobilize for war? Third, how did each side respond to challenges to their authority? And it's very different, by the way. And 4, what was the Republican agenda during the war? Let's go ahead and get started. Factions in the Union. There really aren't any factions in the South. Mountain Whites didn't support slavery or the slave owners or the slaves, but they come north and fight in large numbers, those Appalachian Mountain Whites. But they're not really a discontented faction within the South that's staying there so much. They don't deal with the South. But the North had its factions. They had the War Democrats. The War Democrats were Democrats. They opposed the Republican agenda. They did not believe in free soil. But they are, at the same time, they believe in democratic principles, but they are people who believe we should be going to war. The Union should fight. The Union should force the South to stay. They are the War Democrats. You also have the Peace Democrats. Some of them think they sympathize with the South and they kind of get states' rights as an argument, but they're going to say, you know what, on the other hand, it's just not worth our fight. Some of the Peace Democrats are going to say, we just don't care, let them go, to heck with the South, okay? Well, the most extreme group, the most vocal group of the Peace Democrats are called Copperheads. These are the people willing to go protest, trying to discourage the war effort and basically undermine the Northern war machine. Alright, so these are the different factions that the Union has. Of course, Republicans would be the largest of those factions, but you can't really take for granted, I mean, there's a significant faction of Democrats as well. Mobilization for war. When you have mobilization for war, you're talking about a couple of main things. One is drafting in soldiers, and another one is financing the war. Well, for the draft, North and South both had enough volunteers to fight for about 2 years of the war. But in mid-1863, kind of all the people who wanted to volunteer had volunteered, and now it gets to crunch time. How do you get more people? Well, there are going to be a couple of different things that go on. Number one, Lincoln's going to institute a draft. That's a significant thing because when Lincoln institutes the draft, he is going to essentially be forcing people in. Some of the rich people were able to pay both in the North and in the South. They would pay to get out of the war or pay to have somebody else take their place. So it's called a rich man's war and a poor man's fight in a lot of ways. You have a lot of immigrants who get drafted in. It's kind of a condition of coming into the country. So you're going to even see like New York City has massive draft riots led by immigrants targeting the rich because the rich weren't fighting, targeting African Americans because they perceive this to be a war for their benefit. At the same time, there are draft riots. Lincoln is going to send in the army and crush those draft riots. But there's a lot of discontent around this, and the Copperheads are stirring the pot. Okay? In the South, when they have to go to a draft, they've got a big problem. And this gets into kind of one of our other questions, which is, what does each side do to respond to challenges to their authority? So, you know, on the one hand, drifting now, you know, kind of blending down into question C here, topic C, you've got Lincoln's response to dissidents. Well, Lincoln is going to crush the draft riots, and he is going to jail. He's going to suspend habeas corpus, which are your rights when accused of a crime. He's going to arrest people and hold them without trial. He even deports the leading Copperhead, Clement Van Landingham, a congressman from Ohio. He's going to deport him to Canada during the war and just get him out of there. So Lincoln, he's going to declare martial law. And most of these challenges are happening in the border states. You're talking Maryland, Delaware, Kentucky, okay? A little bit in Missouri even, but more Maryland and Kentucky more than anything else. And so Lincoln is going to declare martial law. He's going to arrest people and hold them without trial. We're talking about thousands of people. Now, history doesn't judge him too harshly because what else could he do? He really had no other choices. At the same time this is going on in the South, they have this big states' rights thing going on, okay? So you've got the South keeps their constitution pretty similar, except for states' rights. They're going to say, and the federal government cannot tell the states what to do in any circumstance. So their government is actually a confederation, more so. The United States, with the national government above the states, is more of a federal government. They are different governmental systems. Well, when the South goes and says we need troops, the states will be like, eh. And this is a big problem because the South runs out of volunteers and they cannot force, they cannot coerce or compel these states into giving them troops, so they start to run out of troops. Big problem. Some states said we'll keep our own militia to defend ourselves, but the biggest problem is they just didn't have enough troops added. And Grant and Lincoln are going to become aware of this and say, fine, we'll just trade one of yours for one of ours and we're just going to kind of grind up troops. So, you know, people start to call Grant the butcher of Vicksburg, but he understands the South won't give up unless they're forced to. All right, finances, another thing, and another contrast, okay? The North is going to institute taxes. They're going to raise the tariff to generate more money. The North is going to print money, which are called greenbacks, and they sell war bonds. And they're going to print about $500 million in greenbacks. The rest of it they are able to pay for in the other ways, including the war bond loans. The South, they ask the states for money. The states are like, forget it. Because again, states' rights, the states don't have to comply. So they're going to end up printing over $1 billion in money. And when you look at the relative inflation levels during the war, in the North, inflation is fairly reasonable, although there is some inflation. In the South, it's hyperinflation. By the end of the war, you have bread riots and women are fighting each other and people don't want to take the Confederate currency and it's just a disaster. They have no gold at that point, nothing to base their currency on. People quit even taking it. Okay, so with both of these and even the response to dissidents, now, like I said, there weren't a lot of dissidents in the South. There just wasn't a subgroup that was campaigning against and critical of the leadership as much as there was so in the North. But with this, you see a definite theme that Lincoln has the power and authority to force states, to force individuals to do what he wants, and he's able to operate a war machine. The South, there has to beg for things, and it doesn't work. And they kind of learned some of the lessons that they should have learned with the Confederation government in the Articles of Confederation in the 1780s. All right, well, this takes us to our fourth question. What was the Republican agenda? The Republicans, they come in with an agenda. It's not just we're getting elected to go fight a war. They hope not to have a war, but they have an agenda they get elected on. So what is it? Well, they have 5 different things. They have the moral tariff. This raises the tariff again, okay? They have, and that's all you really need to know about that. It raises the tariff. We talked about that was a way to finance the war. The Homestead Act. Republicans were free soil. Free soil meant free from slavery, but also free for free men to go and basically farm and have their own, basically farm out their own destiny and live in the West. That the Western land would be open to them. The national banking system. This is going to be an even more advanced version of basically the first and second national banks, where it is going to be able to regulate currency a little, police the banks, and it's essentially what had been missing ever since Jackson killed the second bank. And this is a critical thing for the fighting of a war in terms of holding onto the funds and paying for things and borrowing money and operating the war bonds and printing the greenbacks, but controlling the currency. You can imagine if every state was printing money for themselves during the Civil War, it would have destroyed the currency. Okay, the Moral Land Grant allowed that each Western state, as it came in from being a territory to a state, could sell some of its land to pay for 2 colleges. You look at a lot of the states. I'm in Oregon. We've got Oregon State and University of Oregon. These were both funded through the Moral Land Grant. Okay, and you see many other states where they have a technical college and an agricultural college as what they normally, originally were. But they have 2 initial universities, and these were bankrolled basically through this land grant. The last thing is the Pacific Railway Act, which of course does the Transcontinental Railroad. Now, if you're keeping score at home, what you should be realizing here is the Republicans were the successors to the Whigs, and the Whigs had always wanted the American system. Henry Clay's idea. Well, the American system has come to fruition, but not until the Republicans are in control and the Democrats have all left. The Democrats are a minority in the North. The Southern Democrats all bailed out and seceded. So the Republicans are able to operate and put this American system into place. It said 3 things, if you don't remember. Have a national bank, check. It said have internal improvements paid for by the national government to have interregional or national trade established. Pacific Railway Act, check, okay? And it said you got to have a tariff. They have the Morrill tariff raised up there. And you know, you could even throw in the Homestead Act as and the Morrill Land Grant as things that are establishing more national or interregional trade that's going on. But that's all the time we have for today. Stay classy.